Okay, so the beginning of this chapter on the endocrine system really starts to just give you some basic idea about the endocrine system before it goes into all the individual hormones and structures that you talk about in lab and reinforce in lab. Okay, so on this table you see just a comparison between the endocrine and nervous, remembering that both of these systems are useful, or their basic function is to control or direct other systems and structures. So they're the command center, if you will. And so I say here cooperation for communication. So again, but we're thinking mostly in the terms of directing other structures to do something. And of course, what they do is restore homeostasis, right? So the endocrine and the nervous system are going to have ways of sensing or figuring out there's been an imbalance, and they're going to be responsible for telling the body and specific structures in the body what to do. The nervous system that you talked about in AAP1 really operated by using electricity, right? This change in polarity, depolarization, repolarization, to excite and send information along these long extended neurons down to a target of some sort. And then of course the chemical part of the nervous system had to do with the neurotransmitters, right? So you looked at just a few: acetylcholine for muscle and norepinephrine for the sympathetic postganglionic neurotransmitter. So here for the endocrine, there's no electrical aspect of it, and it's the hormones are the term now we use for the chemical signal. So powerful chemicals, right? Either or, but again, different terms for these. The nervous system is always a very immediate, quick, and close by stimuli. So in other words, one neuron has to be very close to another neuron to get it to do something. Right, so the distance traveled is short, though cumulatively it's very long. Right, but between two cells, it's very short. Right, for the endocrine, because this uses the blood, right, so these powerful chemical signals are dumped into your cardiovascular system and they're pushed through your body. They can have an effect on things that are quite a distance from the original structure that made the hormone. The response time, as I already said, this is a very quick in terms of milliseconds when we talk about the nervous system. So it's immediately depolarizing, repolarizing in milliseconds and releasing neurotransmitters and getting effects, right, causing something to happen. For the endocrine, you're seeing these hormones as not a lot at least, being stored within the cells for release, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time to make the hormone, right? So the structure like the anterior pituitary has to make that hormone and then release it. And so this can take time, okay? And then environment targeted, the endocrine system is only talking to things that are really inside the body, so other structures within the body itself, whereas the nervous system has an influence on external too, because like I said, you move and you communicate, and these are things with stuff outside the body as well as clearly inside the body, like initiating that muscle contraction. All right, so again, nervous system, quick responses, right, cause rapid changes, and this can be in the external, again, to pull something away or run away from something harmful, right? The endocrine is it's considerably slower. I shouldn't say it's very slow, but it's considerably slower. Not going to happen. Sometimes it'd be rapid within minutes, but it's certainly not on the order of milliseconds. And generally, again, you're talking about one structure inside the body affecting something else inside the body, right? And this is also what makes this system really an involuntary. So you're not aware of what's happening. This chemical communication with hormones between structures. All right? Again, the shared goal between the nervous system and endocrine is that we maintain homeostasis. All right? So this cartoon gives you an idea about homeostasis. It also helps you, again, with terms like stimuli and inhibit. These are very important terms. Stimulus is something that would result in a process occurring, And stimulate, right, is making it happen. All right. Whereas inhibit and inhibitor would stop something from happening, and inhibit would be the stopping of that. So this just walks you through, again, reinforcing this idea of homeostasis and how we maintain ourselves in constantly changing circumstances. Whether it's something within the body that's changing, or again, something outside, like temperature inside the body, temperature outside the body, pH inside the body, right? Blood glucose levels, blood calcium levels, the aspect of anxiety, the aspect of depression. I mean, you've got a lot of things that can go on and potentially upset homeostasis. And I often say to students, you're really damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because even if you do nothing, you sit here and do nothing, you're going to use up, oxygen, produce carbon dioxide, you're going to use up glucose, and eventually you're going to, right, upset the balance, the homeostasis. So this is, again, our unifying concept. It helps us understand everything we're going to talk about when we say that. Okay, so we're just going to focus on this in this chapter with it really about the chemical aspects and endocrine. So, and again, you're still looking at what we talked about with the nervous system, and really introduced in the very first chapter of AMP1, is that some sensor or receptor becomes aware of this problem, this imbalance that we state here, sent it to control center. So this control center, again, can either be the endocrine tissue, or it can be the central nervous system, really, right? And so nerve impulse or chemical is sent, and it's sent to some effector. Again, effectors are basically either muscles or glands, quite honestly. And then they are responsible for the actual effect. And then as we return to homeostasis, we're going to slow this process down or bring it to a halt, so that, again, we kind of, and that's why this is called negative feedback. So we have this go here, and then we're saying, okay, slow down or stop, depending on what you did here. All right? So, again, we want to think about the stuff that you already know and how you want to build on that. So I say here, look, we've talked about glands. We introduced them in chapter 1. We reinforce them when we talk about tissues. And then we focus on really some exocrine glands in AMP1. And with exocrine, as it shows you here, this lovely sweat gland. Right? So this is a sweat gland, nice cartoon of the skin or integumentary. And this is an exocrine gland overall. It's also called merocrine or eccrine glands. And they, again, these cells produce, that's what glands do, produce and secrete, release some substances, chemicals, but in an exocrine it's into a duct or tube, right? And then in endocrine, like the thyroid gland, well, there was never a tube that was modified, and that would, again, the tube keeps it very localized. The effects of the gland are very localized. So with the endocrine, we said we can get a long distance result. Well, that's because blood is the carrier of the chemical these cells shown here are producing. So in this case, we have to talk about a target, because in the exocrine, we know that it's only going to go as far as to where the duct leads, right? So here in the sweat gland, it's only going to go out here to the surface of the skin. But in the endocrine, we're dumped in the blood, so where are we going to go from here, right? So this kind of shows the idea of the targets. Okay, just a really simple cartoon. So here's a secretory endocrine cell. Could have been the cell from the thyroid, maybe one of those follicular cells, right? Dumping T3, T4 into the blood. And it's going throughout the body. It's then leaving the blood and binding, this actual T3, T4, these little balls, are binding to some distant target cells. Now, we're going to find out that T3 and T4 affect metabolism. So these can be a number of different cells, muscle, bone, liver, etc. But these targets are unique from other cells in the body, or non-target cells, because they have receptors. So it's this receptor, which is a molecule itself, on the surface of the target cells, binds to the hormone. And any cell that doesn't have a receptor would not bind the hormone, and therefore the hormone would have no effect. Right? So we also want to say, and that's why, again, these when we talk about hormones, we call them messengers, right? Because they're communicating something this specific maker of the hormone is telling these targets to do something. And again, we know that broadly that something is maintaining homeostasis. So here we see an example from this cartoon of other kinds of chemical messengers that don't have quite as wide range of effect, right? And we call these paracrine as opposed to endocrine and autocrine. Excuse me. Now, the difference here is, first of all, what's in common? Both of these are fairly local. In other words, they're released by a cell that has an effect on a nearby cell, right? This is released by a cell and it would affect other cells nearby, or in this cartoon they're showing you it affecting the same cell. All right, so these share that they're very localized effects, different from the endocrine for the most part, right? These two types of substances share that a receptor, again, is needed, and that's shared with the endocrine. But the difference being, again, is that para, your neighbor, is releasing something to tell you, right, to do something, whereas auto is one cell type releasing it and affecting the same cell type. So paracrine is really a good example. These are prostaglandins that are produced by, let's say, endothelial cells, and they influence vascular smooth muscle cells or platelets or fibroblasts. And in the autocrine, we could say this is an endothelial cell that's releasing this, and it's influencing another endothelial cell. So overall, less influential because, again, it's a very local, contained response. All right? So this is a very simple cartoon to say, look at overview of all the structures that really belong to the system, though there's a lot of endocrine not represented here, but we're going to talk about them within each chapter. This is a list of here's some of the things that they do. And again, thinking about this in terms of homeostasis and directing the body to have an appropriate response when situations, right, inside the body and sometimes outside change. All right. So then we get into, what are hormones specifically? What kinds of molecules pass through the cell membrane, what don't? So I say in this slide, in your book tries to bring this to your attention, there are two chemical classes of hormones that, we want to try to start off broadly and then figure out with all the 20 or so hormones we're going to talk about, what do they have in common and how are they different? All right. So we have steroids and basically we have non-steroids. So steroids shown here, classic testosterone, progesterone, aldosterone, cortisol, right? They have in common these cholesterol rings. So this is a 4-ringed structure, right, derived from cholesterol. Cholesterol made by the liver is dumped into the blood and circulates through, and then structures like the testis and the ovaries remove it from the blood and add chemistry to it to give it a specific function. Right? So again, all steroids come from cholesterol, and this is what they include. Now, why is this important? Well, cholesterol is being lipid soluble, right? It's a lipid itself, allows these powerful chemicals that we mentioned here and here to actually move through a membrane. So they don't need, we can go back here, they don't need those receptors on the cell membrane. Okay? And then we have everybody else, right? Really, the non-steroids. So now typically the non-steroids are derived from some sort of amino acid or short chain amino acids or proteins. So they fall into the protein category. And here's just a few examples, and I'm not going to have you know something that belongs to each of these 3 categories. I'm simply going to say, look, if you're not a steroid, you're a non-steroid. And if you're a non-steroid, then you have to have a cell receptor. So, again, how do these hormones work? They are still trying, as I've said, and we'll continue to repeat over and over again, they maintain homeostasis. Whether you're steroid or non-steroid, here's the kinds of things you can do. They're targeting and causing molecular changes. This is not the object of my lecture or what I need you to know, but I can't go on without telling you that this is really how they work, right? They change the basic chemistry of the cell by either causing genes to be turned on or off through transcription and translation. They activate enzymes. They can change the permeability of membranes by putting in transporters. They can affect how often the cells divide and what the cells produce and secrete. All right. So again, the way they do this is they only influence targets and they interact with receptors on or in the cells.